Welcome back to the neighborhood. My name is Dylan Wren,
And I'm Andrew Kimball.
and in this video, we're talking about our top games of 2022. We both played and enjoyed a lot of games this year, some that came out in 2022, and some that we just finally got around to. We also wanted to include our community, so we put a call out on Discord for their lists. We compiled those lists into an overall FN Gamers Game of the Year list. So without further ado, here are our favorite games we played this year.
Both mine and Dylan's number 10 is Marvel Snap. This game came out of nowhere for me, but Marvel Snap is one of the best mobile games I've ever played and one of my new favorite card games. The bite-sized matches are perfect for when you just have a couple of minutes to play, and the random locations keep the game from getting stale or settling into a hardcore meta. The Marvel license also does a lot to keep me engaged, since I'm a fan of the property and the characters. I'm always looking forward to that next match.
The community had a three-way tie for their number 10, with Sifu, a realistic third-person brawler with tight kung fu combat mechanics and a cinematic martial arts action embarking you on a path for revenge, Hades, a roguelike dungeon crawler in which you defy the god of the dead as you hack and slash your way out of the underworld of Greek myth, and one game that is higher up on another list.
My number 9 is Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Kirby makes the transition to 3D in spectacular fashion. This game oozes charm and cuteness in its art style and world design. The gameplay is simple enough that a child could enjoy it, but it has enough depth and variety that it won't be a bore for an adult gamer. The classic ability-based gameplay of Kirby games of the past returns with a new twist. Now you can upgrade your abilities and decide which one you want to bring with you into the levels. The story is simple and straightforward, but the ending takes things up a notch in a way that reminds me that Kirby is a cosmic god with the power to destroy us all if he wanted to do so.
My number 9, and the community's other number 10, is Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. I love Monster Hunter, and Rise has been a ton of fun. The expansion came out this year and added more of everything I could want. A new zone to explore, a bunch of new monsters to fight, and most importantly, new weapons and armor to craft. Sunbreak also added combat maneuvers, followers, and endgame activities, giving us Monster Hunter fans plenty to enjoy.
The community's number 9 is Vampire Survivor, a time survival game with minimalistic gameplay and roguelike elements.
You'll hear more about our number 8 picks later on, as they all show up higher up on other lists.
My number 7 is Naraka Blade Point. Naraka Blade Point is a melee-focused battle royale game where combat is fought using swords, spears, nunchucks, and more. I haven't found very many battle royale games that hold my attention for very long. The unique setting and gameplay of Naraka changed that. This was my go-to multiplayer game for a large part of this year. The combat is much more forgiving than an FPS as it's more akin to a fighting game. The traversal is also a lot of fun, allowing you to leap from buildings, zipline across rooftops or tree lines, and climb pretty much any surface in the game. It has a few rough edges, but Naraka is a great time and definitely worth checking out.
My number 7 was Deathloop. I thought Deathloop looked very cool from the trailers, but as an Xbox gamer primarily, I had to wait until this year to get my hands on it, and it was definitely worth the wait. I had a ton of fun with it. Investigating leads on the time loop to understand what was going on and eventually put together a plan for the perfect day to break free kept me engaged. The world oozed style, and all the toys that the game gives you, mostly in the form of guns and powers, gives you a ton of options as you play around in their sandbox. The community's number 7 was Spiritfarer, a cozy management game about dying.
My number 6 is Dead Cells. I had a blast with Dead Cells this year. The fast-paced and hectic combat was a ton of fun, and the visuals are top tier. There are so many different items and weapons in this game that it can sometimes feel overwhelming, but once I settled into the gameplay loop, I couldn't put it down until I had rolled credits. I'm very much looking forward to the Castlevania crossover coming next year.
My number 6 is The Sinking City. Cosmic horror is one of my favorite genres. Most of the time, it's not done all that well in video games. The Sinking City, on the other hand, completely understood the assignment. The detective gameplay meshes well with the story as you explore the city, trying to uncover what is going on and slowly going mad in the process. I cannot recommend it enough to fans of Eldritch stories.
The community's number 6 was Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, open world Pokemon games and the first installments in the 9th generation of games.
Andrew's number 5 and my number 8, and the community's number 8, is Cult of the Lamb. Cult of the Lamb was a blast to play this year. The mashup of cutesy animals and catchy music with the gruesome bosses and cult sacrifices kept me coming back. The roguelike dungeons were quick and offered some variety in weapons and powers you got during each run. When not killing rival cultists, you would work on building up your own cult with a satisfying base management system. Both systems combined to create one of the most fun indie darlings of 2022. My number 5 shows up higher on someone else's list.
The community's number 5 is Xenoblade Chronicles 3, an action role-playing game with a massive open world to explore. My number 4 is Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread was my first major step into the world of Metroidvania games, and I loved it. The game is a masterclass in creating a feeling of momentum. I always felt like I was moving forward and only ever lost my way once. The art style and cinematic camera do a great job in showing off how awesome Samus truly is as she kicks ass and takes names. The Emmy sections were something that I was hesitant about on paper, but in practice they were a fun change of pace that never lasted too long. And on top of all of that, the boss fights were great from a presentation and gameplay perspective.
My number 4 is Rimworld, the biotech expansion. Rimworld is the closest thing to Another Majesty, one of my favorite games of all time that I have been able to find. You can take control of your colonists, but for the most part, they carry out their own lives based on the work priorities you've set up for them. The emergent stories that evolve as they develop relationships and tackle different challenges like raids or a sudden heat wave keep me coming back so I can see how it all plays out. The biotech expansion that came out this year added a ton of options and is well worth it if you enjoy the game. The community's number 4 and my number 5 is The Quarry. The Quarry is like getting to play through a kinda cheesy B-horror movie, and I loved it. While I wish some of the characters had been fleshed out a little more, I really enjoyed hanging out with friends and playing through the game over the course of a few nights. There were plenty of laughs and some scares, especially for the more jumpy of our group, and I enjoyed uncovering what was going on at the camp and watching someone else try to survive the monsters or make choices I wouldn't have thought to make on my own.
My number 3 shows up later on another list.
My number 3 is Destiny 2, The Witch Queen. I have been enjoying Destiny 2 off and on since it came out. This most recent expansion has knocked it out of the park with a cool new area to explore and huge story events setting up even more to come. Destiny is still one of the best feeling shooters to me, and this expansion and this year's seasons have only refined that and added in new toys to the mix, like the glaives and weapon crafting. There's so much to do and so many options that I can always find something for whatever mood I am in.
The community's number 3 and my number 8 is Horizon Forbidden West. Horizon Forbidden West is more of what Horizon Zero Dawn gave us, and that's not a bad thing. The open world design is still fairly cookie cutter, but the improvements to combat, traversal, and a more interesting story make this an experience worth playing. The characters have much more depth, and Aloy is way more interesting this time around. And of course, there are all sorts of crazy robot dinosaurs to battle against in epic fashion. As a fan of open world games, I had a great time with Horizon Forbidden West, and I think it does everything just a little bit better than its predecessor, which adds up to a greater experience overall. My number 2 shows up later on another list.
My number 2, and Andrew's number 3, is A Plague Tale Requiem. Andrew has been a huge fan of the original game for a while, and this year I finally got around to playing it in preparation for the sequel, and I am kicking myself for not playing it sooner. A Plague Tale Requiem took everything that we loved about the game and refined it, giving you more options and adding a lot of quality of life improvements. The band of characters keeps you invested as you explore the world that mixes beauty and horror. The story did a fantastic job of putting you in Amicia's shoes, helping you feel the constant tension, and it hooked me through to the end. The Community's number 2 shows up later on another list.
Both mine and Dylan's number 1 game of the year and the Community's number 2 is Elden Ring. As fans of From Software and Souls-like games, Elden Ring had a ton of hype behind it. Could they pull off an open world? Would it work with the formula of their games? Would the story and lore live up to the hype of having George R.R. Martin plastered all over the promotional material? Well, not only did Elden Ring live up to those expectations, it exceeded them. This game was an incredible experience that we couldn't put down. We each have around 200 hours in Elden Ring and got all of the achievements. We just could not stop playing it.
The open world did so much to breathe new life into the genre. Not only did it excel at giving players a sense of exploration with excitement and danger around every corner, but it also allowed players the flexibility to leave a challenging section and return to it later after exploring and gaining strength, whereas in previous titles, the only option was to beat your head against the wall until you broke through. The various bosses and characters were incredible, and there are a few boss fights that we will never forget. Elden Ring set a new standard for open world games and From Software games, and it was an incredible time in the industry and the community, and we're glad that we got to be a part of it.
The Community's number 1 game of the year, and my number 2, is God of War Ragnarok. I enjoyed the 2018 God of War quite a bit. It's one of my favorite Sony Studios games. The sequel is a step above in my opinion. 2018's God of War told a very simple and intimate story about a father and son. And while that was great, and a nice refresh on the character of Kratos, I love the fact that God of War Ragnarok tells an epic story that explores much of what the 9 realms and their cast of characters have to offer. This doesn't mean that there's no emotional weight behind the story. It is still the sequel to 2018's God of War after all, but everything that was hinted at in the first game gets blown out here in spectacular fashion. The gameplay saw some minor tweaks to combat and traversal that made the overall experience more fun. I personally love the puzzles and how gamey the gameplay is despite the story being so AAA and high budget. All of that, along with the gorgeous visuals and incredible performances, make God of War Ragnarok a must-play.
What were your personal games of 2022? Let us know in the comments.
And if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing so you can get notified whenever we post a new one.
We talked about many of these games more in depth in our podcast, so if you want to hear those thoughts, check it out on your favorite podcast service. And remember, stay friendly, gamers.